The sound of gunfire echoes across the vast Arizona desert as dust clouds swirl in the distance. A lone rider, silhouetted against the crimson sunset, spurs his horse desperately across the rocky terrain. Blood seeps through his torn shirt, staining the leather saddle beneath him. This is Jake Morrison, and he's running out of time. The wind howls through the canyon walls as Jake's horse stumbles, foam gathering at its mouth. Behind him, the faint sound of pursuing hoofbeats grows closer. His weathered hands grip the reins tighter, his gray eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of salvation. Then, emerging from the heat haze like a mirage, he sees it, his abandoned ranch, standing solitary against the endless expanse of red earth and sagebrush. Jake dismounts with a grunt of pain, his boots hitting the ground with a dull thud. The ranch house stands empty, its windows dark and lifeless, exactly as he left it 3 months ago. But it's not the house he needs now. His eyes focus on the old barn, weathered and gray, its wooden planks warped by years of desert sun and winter frost. Inside that barn waits his fastest horse, Diablo, a black stallion that could carry him across the Mexican border before dawn. The distant sound of riders grows louder. Jake can almost hear Sheriff Coleman's gruff voice urging his posse forward. Time is slipping away like sand through his fingers. He approaches the barn doors, his spurs jangling softly with each step. The padlock hangs loose. Strange. He remembers securing it properly. But there's no time to wonder about such details now. Jake's calloused hands reach for the heavy wooden beam that bars the door. Every second counts. Empty the barn, prepare the horse, and disappear into the night. It should be simple. He's done it before, always staying one step ahead of the law, one step ahead of his past. The beam slides away with a scraping sound that seems to echo across the desert like a warning. But as the barn doors creak open on their rusted hinges, something stops Jake dead in his tracks. Instead of the expected snorting and stamping of his impatient stallion, instead of the familiar musty smell of hay and leather, something completely unexpected reaches his ears. Laughter. Children's laughter, bright and innocent, floating through the dusty air like music from another world. For a moment, Jake wonders if the blood loss has made him delirious. Perhaps the desert heat has finally claimed his sanity. But the sound comes again, clearer this time, the unmistakable giggle of a child, followed by whispered voices speaking in rapid Spanish. Jake's hand instinctively moves to his Colt revolver, then hesitates. These aren't the voices of armed men lying in ambush. These are children, real children, somewhere in the darkness of his barn. His heart pounds as he steps forward, his eyes adjusting to the dim interior. Shafts of dusty sunlight filter through gaps in the wooden walls, illuminating floating particles that dance in the air like tiny spirits. Hello. Jake's voice comes out as a harsh whisper, roughened by years of tobacco and desert wind. The laughter stops immediately, replaced by the sound of scurrying and muffled whispers. Someone is definitely hiding in here, but where is his horse? As Jake moves deeper into the barn, his boots crunch on scattered hay. The stalls are empty, every single one. His heart sinks as the reality hits him. Diablo is gone. His escape route, his salvation, vanished without a trace. But that's not the most disturbing discovery. In the corner where he used to store his saddles and tack, Jake sees something that makes his blood run cold. A small makeshift camp has been set up among the hay bales. 3 tiny bedrolls lie side by side, and scattered around them are the remnants of a meager meal, hardtack crumbs, an empty tin can, and a water jug that looks like it's been refilled from his well. Someone has been living in his barn, and they've been here for a while. The sound of approaching hoofbeats grows louder, and Jake realizes he has perhaps 10 minutes before Sheriff Coleman and his men arrive. 10 minutes to figure out what happened to his horse, who these mysterious children are, and how he's going to get out of this situation alive. The irony isn't lost on him. He came here seeking refuge, only to find that someone else had the same idea. A small sound draws his attention to the hayloft above. There, peering down through the wooden slats like frightened animals, are 3 pairs of dark eyes. Children's eyes, wide with fear and curiosity. The oldest appears to be maybe 10 years old, a girl with long black hair braided with colorful ribbons. Beside her, 2 younger boys clutch each other, their clothes torn and dusty from travel. "Please, senor," the girl whispers in accented English, her voice barely audible. We mean no harm. We were just trying to stay warm. Jake stares up at them, his mind racing. These aren't local ranch children. Their clothes are wrong. Their faces bear the distinctive features of the Apache mixed with Mexican heritage. They're refugees, probably running from something just as he is. But from what? And how did they end up in his barn? The sound of horses is very close now. Jake can hear Sheriff Coleman's voice barking orders to his men. They'll surround the ranch within minutes, and any chance of escape will be gone forever. Jake has two choices: abandon these children to whatever fate awaits them and try to flee on foot across the desert, or find another way out of this mess. But as he looks up into those frightened young faces, something stirs deep in Jake's chest. Something he thought had died years ago during the war. Something that reminds him of the man he used to be before the violence and the running began. These children are looking at him not as a dangerous outlaw, but as a potential savior. And for the first time in years, Jake Morrison finds himself caring about someone other than himself. The girl climbs down from the loft with surprising grace, followed by her two younger companions. As they stand before him in the dusty barn, Jake can see the full extent of their journey written on their faces. These children have seen things no child should see, survived dangers that would break most adults. Their story is etched in every line of exhaustion, every cautious movement, every glance toward the door. "My name is Maria," the girl says, her voice stronger now. "These are my brothers, Carlos and Miguel. Our village, our family." Her voice breaks, and she cannot finish the sentence. Jake doesn't need to hear the rest. He's seen enough war, enough violence, enough senseless death to fill in the blanks. These children are survivors of something terrible, and somehow they've found their way to his barn, to his sanctuary, just as he sought the same refuge. The parallel isn't lost on him, and neither is the responsibility that now weighs on his shoulders. The hoofbeats are almost at the ranch now. Through the gaps in the barn walls, Jake can see dust clouds approaching from multiple directions. Sheriff Coleman has been thorough this time. There will be no easy escape. But as Jake looks at Maria and her brothers, he realizes that escape might not be the most important thing anymore. Sometimes a man has to make a stand, not for himself, but for something greater. The barn falls silent except for the sound of their breathing and the whisper of wind through the wooden walls. Outside, Jake can hear the sheriff's men dismounting, their spurs jingling as they spread out around the buildings. Time has run out, and whatever happens next will determine not just Jake's fate, but the fate of 3 innocent children who have already lost everything once. As the first boot steps onto the porch of the ranch house, Jake Morrison makes a decision that will change everything. The empty barn has revealed its secrets, and among those secrets, Jake has found something he never expected to find again: a reason to fight for someone other than himself. The sun disappears behind the western mountains, casting long shadows across the desert. In the gathering darkness, the barn holds its breath, waiting to see what morning will bring. But one thing is certain: by dawn, nothing will ever be the same again. Sheriff Coleman's voice cuts through the desert night like a blade. "Morrison, we know you're in there. Come out with your hands up, and nobody has to die tonight." Jake presses his back against the barn wall, his mind calculating rapidly. Through the weathered planks, he can see the flickering light of torches surrounding the ranch. Coleman has brought at least 8 men, maybe more. They've positioned themselves strategically around every possible escape route, their rifles glinting in the moonlight that now bathes the desert in silver. Maria clutches her brothers closer, their small bodies trembling against her. Carlos, the middle child, can't be more than 8 years old, his dark eyes wide with terror that Jake recognizes all too well. It's the same look he's seen on countless faces during the war, the expression of innocent souls caught in the crossfire of adult violence. Miguel, the youngest, buries his face in Maria's shoulder, his small fingers gripping her torn dress. "Senor," Maria whispers urgently, "there is a way. The old mine shaft behind the barn. We found it when we were looking for water. It goes deep into the mountain." Jake's eyebrows furrow. He's lived on this ranch for 3 years, and he never knew about any mine shaft. But then again, he realizes with bitter irony, he never really explored his own property. He was always too busy running, too focused on the next escape, the next job, the next temporary sanctuary. "How deep?" Jake asks, his voice barely audible. "Very deep, senor. Carlos fell partway down when we first found it. There are old wooden beams, like someone was digging for silver or gold long ago. But it is dangerous. The sound of boots approaching the barn grows louder. Jake can hear Coleman's deputy, a young hothead named Billy Watts, suggesting they just burn the whole place down and be done with it. Coleman's gruff response stops that idea, but Jake knows the sheriff's patience won't last forever. Listen to me carefully. Jake whispers to the children, kneeling down to their eye level. I'm going to create a distraction. When I do, you three need to get to that mine shaft and hide as deep as you can go. Don't come out until you hear my voice calling your names. Do you understand? Maria's eyes search his face, and in them Jake sees a wisdom far beyond her years. You are not coming with us, are you, senor? The question hangs in the air like smoke from a campfire. Jake could lie, could tell her he'll be right behind them, but something in those dark eyes demands honesty. I don't know, little one, but I promise you this. Whatever happens to me, I won't let them hurt you or your brothers. Morrison, Coleman's voice booms again. I'm giving you one more chance. Walk out of that barn, and we'll talk like civilized men. Jake almost laughs at the irony. Civilized men. As if there's anything civilized about the life he's been living, the choices he's made, the blood on his hands. But looking at these children, he realizes that maybe civilization isn't about the past. Maybe it's about what a man chooses to do when it matters most. He moves toward his old gun cabinet, still somehow intact after all this time. Inside, wrapped in oiled cloth, lies his father's Winchester rifle and a box of ammunition he's been saving for emergencies. If this isn't an emergency, Jake thinks grimly, nothing ever will be. There's something else, senor, Maria says quietly as Jake loads the rifle. Your horse, we know where he is. Jake freezes. Diablo. Where? The bad men took him. 3 days ago. They came in the night, very quiet. We hid in the hay, but we saw them. They spoke of selling him in Tucson, said he was worth more than gold. The pieces start falling into place in Jake's mind. Horse thieves had found his ranch before he returned, stolen his stallion, and disappeared into the night. But who were they? And why had they left everything else untouched? Did you see their faces? Jake asks. Carlos nods vigorously. See, senor. One had a scar here. He draws a line down his cheek with his finger. And the other was very tall with yellow hair like corn. Jake's blood runs cold. Scarface Eddie Mullins and Dutch Vanderberg. He knows these men, has even ridden with them on occasion. They're part of the Crimson Canyon Gang, notorious for their brutality and their complete lack of honor among thieves. If they stole Diablo, it means they knew Jake would come back for him. This isn't just horse theft, it's a trap. Morrison, Coleman shouts. Time's up. Boys, surround that barn. Through the gaps in the walls, Jake can see the sheriff's men closing in, their weapons ready. But now he understands what's really happening here. Coleman isn't just chasing a bank robber. He's walking into the same trap that was set for Jake. The Crimson Canyon Gang has played them all like pieces on a chessboard. Maria, Jake says urgently, when you were hiding, did you hear the horse thieves say anything about the sheriff? About a plan. Her face grows pale in the moonlight. See, the tall one said something about how the law would come, and then they would have both the horse and the reward money. They laughed about it, like it was a great joke. The full picture crystallizes in Jake's mind with stunning clarity. Eddie and Dutch stole his horse, knowing he'd return for it. They probably sent an anonymous tip to Coleman about Jake's location, figuring the sheriff would come with a small posse. Then they planned to ambush everyone, kill Coleman and his men, collect the reward money for Jake's capture dead or alive, and disappear with both the horse and the bounty. But they didn't count on 3 Apache Mexican children disrupting their carefully laid plans. The first gunshot shatters the desert silence, followed immediately by Coleman's anguished cry. Ambush. Take cover. Jake peers through a gap in the barn wall and sees muzzle flashes erupting from the rocky outcropping north of the ranch house. The Crimson Canyon Gang has made their move, and Coleman's men are caught in the open, their torches making them perfect targets in the darkness. The mine shaft now. Jake hisses to the children. Go. But Maria hesitates. What about you, senor? You cannot fight them all alone. I'm not alone, Jake replies, surprising himself with the conviction in his voice. I have something to fight for now. Another volley of gunfire erupts outside, and Jake hears one of Coleman's deputies cry out in pain. The sheriff's voice rises above the chaos, trying to rally his men, but they're pinned down with nowhere to run. They came here expecting to arrest one outlaw, not fight a war against the entire Crimson Canyon gang. Jake makes his decision. He kicks open the barn's back door and steps into the night, his father's Winchester held ready. The children slip out behind him and disappear toward the mine shaft, moving like shadows across the moonlit ground. For a moment, Jake allows himself to hope they'll make it to safety. Coleman, Jake shouts across the firefight. It's a trap. Eddie Mullins and Dutch Vanderberg. They're using us both. The sheriff's response comes from behind an overturned water trough. Morrison, that you? What the hell are you talking about? They stole my horse. Set us both up. You want to live through this? You better listen to me. Another burst of gunfire forces Jake to dive behind a pile of firewood. Splinters explode around him as bullets tear through the old logs. From his position, he can see at least 4 muzzle flashes from the rocks. The entire gang is here, just as he suspected. All right, Morrison, Coleman calls out. What do you want me to do? Jake almost smiles despite the dire circumstances. 6 months ago, he would have let Coleman and his men die, used the distraction to escape into the desert. But something has changed. Maybe it's the memory of those 3 frightened faces looking up at him from the hayloft. Maybe it's the realization that running forever isn't really living. Or maybe it's simply that a man reaches a point where he has to choose who he wants to be. There's a dry creek bed about 50 yards to your east. Jake shouts, if you can get your men there, you'll have cover and a clear shot at their position. Why should I trust you? Because right now, Sheriff, I'm the only friend you've got. Jake breaks from his cover, firing rapidly at the muzzle flashes to draw their attention away from Coleman's men. His shots ring out across the desert like thunder, and he has the satisfaction of hearing at least one cry of pain from the rocks above. But his position is exposed now, and return fire forces him to scramble desperately for new cover. Coleman must have taken his advice, because suddenly the pattern of gunfire changes. The sheriff's men are moving, their own weapons now adding to the chaos. Jake uses the distraction to work his way closer to the rocky outcropping where the gang has taken position. As he climbs through the scrub brush and over tumbled boulders, Jake's mind keeps returning to the children. Are they safe in the mine shaft? Will they have the sense to stay hidden until this is over? The thought of them being caught in the crossfire fills him with a protective rage he's never felt before. A shadow moves above him, and Jake looks up to see Dutch Vanderberg silhouetted against the stars, his rifle aimed directly at Jake's chest. Time seems to slow as the tall outlaw's finger tightens on the trigger. This is it, Jake realizes. This is how it ends. But the shot that rings out doesn't come from Dutch's rifle. The blonde outlaw staggers backward, clutching his shoulder, his weapon clattering down the rocks. Behind him, Sheriff Coleman emerges from the darkness, his smoking revolver gleaming in the moonlight. Nobody shoots a man in the back on my watch, Coleman growls. Not even a snake like you, Dutch. The tide of the battle turns quickly after that. With Dutch wounded and their leader Eddie Mullins trapped between Jake's position and the sheriff's men, the remaining gang members lose heart. 2 surrender outright, while a third tries to flee across the desert on foot, only to be brought down by one of Coleman's deputies. As the gunsmoke clears and the desert falls silent once more, Jake finds himself standing face to face with Sheriff Coleman for the first time in 2 years. The older man's weathered face is grim, his gray mustache stained with dust and sweat. For a long moment, neither man speaks. You saved my life, Morrison, Coleman says finally, and the lives of my men. Jake nods slowly. They would have killed you all, taken the reward money, and disappeared. Question is, what am I supposed to do with you now? Coleman's hand rests on his revolver, but there's no threat in his posture. You're still wanted for that bank job in Phoenix. I know. Jake sets his rifle down on a nearby boulder, a gesture of surrender. But before you decide, there's something else you need to know. Jake tells Coleman about the children, about their story of fleeing violence, about their courage in hiding and surviving in the harsh desert. As he speaks, he can see the sheriff's expression changing, the hard lines of law enforcement giving way to something more human. Where are they now? Coleman asks. Hidden somewhere safe. But they'll need help, Sheriff. Real help. A place to live, people who'll take care of them. Coleman is quiet for a long time, his eyes scanning the horizon where the first pale light of dawn is beginning to show. When he speaks again, his voice carries a weight that Jake recognizes, the weight of a man making a decision that will define who he is. My wife Martha has been wanting to take in orphans ever since our boy died of the fever. Says the house is too quiet without children's voices. Coleman looks directly at Jake. These kids you're talking about, they'd be welcome in our home. Jake feels something loosen in his chest, a tension he didn't even realize he'd been carrying. They're good kids, Sheriff. Brave. They deserve a chance. And what about you, Morrison? What chance are you asking for? The question hangs in the air between them. Jake knows that Coleman could arrest him right now, drag him back to Phoenix to face justice for his crimes. The law is the law, and Jake has broken it more times than he can count. But he also knows that justice isn't always found in courtrooms and jail cells. I'm not asking for anything I don't deserve, Jake says quietly. But if you're willing, I'd like to make things right. There are people I've wronged, money I've stolen that could be returned. Maybe there's a way to pay my debts without spending the rest of my life behind bars. Coleman studies Jake's face in the growing light of dawn. You're talking about turning yourself in? Cooperating with the law? I'm talking about being the kind of man those children thought I was when they looked at me with trust instead of fear. The sheriff is quiet for another long moment, then holsters his revolver. There's a territorial judge in Tucson who's known for being fair-minded. Judge Harrison. He might be willing to work with a man who's genuinely trying to make amends, especially if that man just helped prevent the massacre of a sheriff's posse. As if summoned by their voices, three small figures emerge from behind the barn. Maria leads her brothers across the desert toward them, her chin held high despite the exhaustion written on her face. When she reaches Jake, she looks up at him with those wise, dark eyes. The shooting is over, senor? It's over, Maria. This is Sheriff Coleman. He and his wife would like to talk to you about giving you and your brothers a home. The girl's composure finally cracks, and tears begin to stream down her dust-stained cheeks. A real home? With a real family? Coleman kneels down to her level, his gruff voice gentling. A real home, little one. With warm beds and hot meals, and people who'll love you like their own. As the sun rises over the Arizona desert, casting long shadows across the ranch that has witnessed so much violence and tragedy, something new begins to take shape. Jake Morrison, the outlaw who came seeking a horse and an escape route, has found something far more valuable, a chance at redemption, and the knowledge that sometimes the most important thing a man can do is choose to care about someone other than himself. The barn stands empty now, its secrets revealed, its purpose transformed. But the laughter that once echoed within its walls has grown into something larger. The sound of a new family being born from the ashes of the old, and a man discovering that it's never too late to become who you were meant to be. In the distance, church bells ring from the town of Copper Creek, calling the faithful to Sunday morning service. For the first time in years, Jake Morrison thinks he might just answer that call.